Well, everyone, please take a seat if you have one. Well, it's great to see you all today. President Macron and I have had a chance to spend some time together. We went to private dinner last night with our wives, and just came to tell you that we're leaving. But it's wonderful to have him here. We've had great conversations and always appreciate the opportunity to share ideas with you, Mr. President. And I especially enjoyed our time that Jill and I and Brigitte had last night in our visit. First time I've gone to dinner, private dinner in Washington in a long, long time. And but I had the protection of the French government with me. But all kidding aside, France is one of our strongest partners, and historically, but one of our strongest partners and our most capable allies. And Manuel has also become a friend, in addition to being president of that great country. And we share the same values, and we remain the core common agenda that we address all challenges together. And occasionally we have some slight differences, but never in a fundamental way, so thus far, at least as long as I've been in Washington, and that's been more than a couple of years. Today, we reaffirm that France and the United States, together with all our NATO allies and European Union and G7, stand as strong as ever against Russia's brutal war against Ukraine. We talked a lot about that in our bilateral meeting. And we'll continue the strong support to the people of Ukraine as they defend their homes and their families and their sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russian aggression, which has been incredibly brutal. I knew Russia was, but I didn't anticipate them being as brutal as they have been and what they've been doing. Many of the reporters in this room have been there themselves and covered from there, and they know what it's like. Today, we reaffirm that, as I said, we're going to stand together against this brutality. And we'll continue the strong support for the Ukrainian people as they defend their homes and their families and their nurseries, their hospitals, their sovereignty, their integrity, and against Russian aggression. And I want to thank you, Mr. President, for welcoming that the people of France have given to over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. It's a mark of who you are as a people. And they're fleeing Putin's just barbarism. Putin thinks that he can crush the will of all those who oppose his imperial ambitions. But attacking civilian infrastructures in Ukraine, choking off energy to Europe to drive up prices, exacerbating the food crisis, that's hurting very vulnerable people, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. And he's not going to succeed. President Macron and I have resolve that we're going to continue working together to hold Russia accountable for their actions and to mitigate the global impacts of Putin's war on the rest of the world. The United States is helping Europe diversify away from Russian natural gas in the immediate term, and while accelerating our clean energy transitions, and we're going to continue working in close partnership with Europe as we move forward. I welcome the progress we've already made in many of these issues through the US-EU Task Force on Energy Security. And today, we also committed to deepening cooperation between France and the United States on civil nuclear energy through our bilateral clean energy partnership. Around the world, France and the United States are working to strengthen stability and security. We share the vision, the same vision in the Indo-Pacific. We're looking for one Indo-Pacific that's free and open, prosperous and secure. And we're going to continue to strengthen our cooperation to defend core international principles in the Indo-Pacific, including freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight. We're working together to support the Middle East that is more integrated, peaceful, and prosperous. And we want to particularly thank President Macron for his efforts to help bring about the historic maritime boundaries agreement between Israel and Lebanon. We also stand with the people of Iran. And then the French and the United States are working together and hold accountable those responsible for the human rights abuses to counter Iran's support for Russia's war and to ensure that Iran does not ever acquire a nuclear weapon. And as we in the United States are looking forward to hosting the upcoming U.S.-African Leaders Summit, President Macron and I understand Africa's influence and importance, and he has much to add. France has much to add. We're also going to deepen our engagement, listening to and working with our African partners to help strengthen the governance and security and economic opportunities across the continent and to tackle the global challenges of our time. Our partnership also extends to cooperating in outer space, from coordinating defense of our space activities to strengthening scientific efforts to monitor Earth's changing climate. And we had a detailed discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act. I know none of you are curious about that, but we did talk about that a good deal. The United States and Europe share the goal of making bold investments in clean energy to meet the challenges of the climate crisis and to build the industries of the future, including batteries and green hydrogen. We agreed to discuss practical steps to coordinate and align our approaches so that we can strengthen and secure the supply chains, manufacturing, and innovation on both sides of the Atlantic. We ask our teams to follow up on this part as ongoing U.S.-EU consultation continues, because we can work out some of the differences that exist. I'm confident. France and the United States are also leading efforts to strengthen the global health and global health security. President Macron visits falls on the World AIDS Day, and I want to particularly highlight our joint effort to reach our goal of ending the AIDS epidemic by 2030. That is a goal we set, a goal we're going to accomplish, and a goal we're sticking with. And to do it, we have all the tools we need. We just have to make finishing this fight a top priority for not just the two of us, but for other nations as well. And that's why I'm proud to take the baton from you, President Macron, and host the Global Fund's 7th Replenishment Conference this year, building on France's strong record of leadership. We've raised $15.7 billion with the United States and France as the two largest contributors to the Global Fund, and it's going to save millions, literally millions of lives. If I listed all the areas where cooperation between France and the United States were delivering meaningful progress, we'd be here until dinner time. So let me just close by highlighting our long-term investment to deepen the ties between our people, particularly the U.S.-French Fulbright program, which celebrates its 75th anniversary and has facilitated thousands of exchanges between our students, our educators, over the last decades. It's been critical to our relationship. It's a key part of ensuring that the future of this vital alliance remains strong and vibrant for generations to come. So, Emmanuel, thank you again for all that our nations are doing together in cooperation. My administration has built our foreign policy around the strength of our alliances, and France is the very heart of that commitment. So, merci, my friend, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. I began to refer to him privately as my closer. That deal with Lebanon and Israel, we did negotiate, but we needed a closer to get the job done, and you did it, and thank you very much. All right, we're each going to call on two people, the total of two people, total of four all told. How about NPR, Tamara Keith?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a domestic question for you, and then Mr. Macron, I have a question for you about Ukraine. But first, President Biden, do the freight rail workers deserve more than 1 day of paid sick leave, like millions of Americans have? And if so, why didn't you negotiate for that when you were helping to negotiate that contract that you now want Congress to impose?
I love you guys. I negotiated a contract no one else could negotiate. The only thing that was left out was whether or not it was paid leave. You know, I've been trying to get paid leave, not just for rail workers, for everybody. But that other team, they're called the Republicans, they voted against it. They said we couldn't do it. We're one of the few nations in the world that don't have paid leave for our workers. And so what we're doing is we can't afford to have, and by the way, in the meantime, they got a 45% increase in salary, et cetera. There's a lot of good things that happened in that. And in fact, this shuts down over the question of 1 to 5 paid, or 7 or 9, whatever the numbers would be negotiated of paid leave days. It's going to immediately cost 750,000 jobs and cause a recession. And so what I made it really clear is that what was negotiated was so much better than anything they ever had, that it's worth, and they all signed on to it, by the way. There are only 4 unions out of the 13 or 14 that didn't agree. So the majority at the time was that I presented it. They asked me to do it. I presented it. They all signed on. But here's the story. It doesn't mean because we are going to pass this, God willing, by Friday, by the weekend, that I'm going to back off of paid leave. I made it really clear I'm going to continue to fight for paid leave for not only rail workers, but for all American workers. I imagine it may surprise some of our European friends that there's no paid leave in the United States of America. We're one of the few major countries in the world that don't have it. And it's about time. And so that's the context in which this all took place. And labor signed on to it as well, as you recall, initially. There were 4 unions out of the, I think, 13 or 14 that didn't like it. But I think we're going to get it done, but not within this agreement. Not within this agreement. We're going to avoid the rail strike, keep the rails running, keep things moving, and I'm going to go back and we're going to get paid leave, not just for rail workers, but for all workers.
President Macron, President Biden is asking Congress for $38 billion of additional funding for support for Ukraine. There's been some pushback from Republicans in Congress saying that they cannot continue to write a blank check. So do you have confidence that the United States will be able to continue supporting Ukraine's defense in the way it has over the past year, in the months going forward? And did you talk to President Biden about trying to urge Ukraine to negotiate to end this war, especially with winter bearing down and the effects on energy prices?
Look, I do thank President Biden and his administration for the great commitment they had vis-à-vis Ukrainian people. And let me just say that our 2 nations are made of values and history. And what is at stake in Ukraine is not just very far from here, in a small country somewhere in Europe, but it's about our values. And it's about our principles. And it's about what we agreed together in the UN Charter, protecting sovereignty, in territorial integrity. And this is why I do believe that having the US strongly supporting the Ukrainians in that time is very important, not just for the Ukrainians. For the Europeans, we are. This is why we do thank you for this solidarity. But for the stability of our world today. Because if we consider that we can abandon the country and abandon the full respect of these principles, it means that there is no possible stability in this world. So I think it's extremely important to have you so much committed. So I'm confident because I think your people and your representative do endorse and understand these objectives. We will follow up our own support. We increased our military support. We increased our economic support. We are increasing our humanitarian support. And for the second question you raised, let me tell you that we will never urge the Ukrainians to make a compromise which will not be acceptable for them. Because they are so brave and they defend precisely their lives, their nation, and our principles. And because it will never build a sustainable peace. If we want a sustainable peace, we have to respect the Ukrainians to decide the moment and the conditions in which they will negotiate about their territory and their future.